Learn more at seed.com/public. And BetterHelp, committed to supporting mental health through therapy and helping clients find balance. Clients are matched with one of 35,000 therapists for online therapy from anywhere at betterhelp.com/public.
Many smartphones now have a magic eraser. With just a tap, you can delete people from pictures, even add AI-generated content that never existed.
I took out all of the clutter and all of the stuff in the background, and it just looks, I'm like, well, where were we? You can just AI your way into a picture that could be anywhere.
Which makes every photo taken these days more fantasy than reality. That's coming up Monday on Point.
You know a good story when you hear it. Makes you feel, laugh, think. Sometimes you get a little teary. I'm Scott Simon, host of Weekend Edition Saturday, and each week we bring you stories from around the country and around the world. Stories that help you learn, make you smile, catch you by surprise. Please join us every Saturday for the news you need and the stories you won't forget.
Saturday morning from 8 to 10 on WAER.
You're listening to 88.3 WAER, Syracuse Public Media, your local NPR station from the Newhouse School at Syracuse University.
SportsNite, your home for all SU sports talk.
Syracuse players, they don't find a player boxed out. They turn around and try to jump up and grab the ball. That's not rebounding. That's not boxing out. That's lazy. It is nowhere close to an overreaction to say that they can go 500 or better in ACC play.
I think there's something to be said about that specific phenomenon. 5 guys saying, there's no backup plan. It's just us.
Breaking down everything from around the hill.
When you get doubled up on your shots and even one more to put a cherry on top, there's no possible way you can win a lacrosse game.
You can tell it just dissipates out of nowhere. And it's the in-game adjustments that have hurt Syracuse.
And giving hot takes along the way.
Naheem McLeod, they want him to be Jesse Edwards, and he just isn't.
Fran Brown is a home run hire for Syracuse.
Get your voice heard by calling in at 315-443-2011 or interact with us on social media at WAER Sports Talk. It's Sports Night, and it starts right now.
Welcome into our Ostrom Avenue studio Sports Night. It's back from 8 to 9 here on WAER alongside Griffin Marcy. I'm Hudson Ridley, and Griffin, it may be kind of the doldrums of winter almost. It's a little cold outside, but there's still a lot going on.
There is. You got all sorts of things. You got basketball, lacrosse getting started soon, some headlines from football today. You got it all going on here in the cold.
All 3 sports mainly covered on WAER will have something today, and it mainly starts with Kyle McCord and his official decision today to go to the NFL. That surprised you? Call in 315-443-2011. You can talk to us there, or you can text us. That's at 315-556-3929. And we want to thank, too, the people who are listening along on Twitter for the first time today, live on Twitter as well. That's at WAER Sports Talk. But like I said, it almost felt like if he got that waiver, he was applying for a waiver to play another year. If he got that waiver, it felt like he would come back. I'm a little surprised he didn't obtain this waiver, I feel like.
Yeah, I feel like you could at least wait out the process, to be honest with you. I mean, he didn't even wait for the decision to making to happen. He must have gotten some really good feedback from the scouts, from what he's heard, I imagine.
I think he might have heard back. Fran Brown said earlier in the week that he will hear. Now, there was no official thing on whether or not he did, but I feel like he might have heard back. But I think you're right. He probably heard some very good stuff at this point from NFL scouts.
Doesn't really surprise me with the kind of year he had, obviously loaded from top to bottom. The main thing is this for Syracuse fans: the dream is dead. Not getting Kyle McCord back for one more year. Be interesting to see how they reload as a whole, but you can't, and I'm not going to fault the guy for trying to go chase that NFL for the next level. Come back for 1 year, could possibly destroy his career.
Yeah.
So
especially in a weaker quarterback class. I mean, he had the season of a lifetime, basically, this year. There's nothing more you could have asked from him, and now that he has the chance to actually go to the league in a year where guys that we thought would go to the draft are dropping out of the draft and not going, staying extra years. I mean, he's a real riser.
He is. I mean, this draft is full of a lot of guys that have the big names in the spotlight, but didn't necessarily live up to their expectations, whether that's Carson Beck over at Georgia or, I mean, you saw Quinn Ewers didn't obviously have the best year, did just declare for the draft. There's a lot of big names, but
Jalen Milroe, a guy who will likely come back next year or go somewhere else or transfer because he's not ready either.
Just didn't have the years that you were expected, so maybe he realizes the time is now, take advantage of the opportunity, give myself the best chance that I can have.
I mean, yeah, right now he's ranked QB number 8 according to Pro Football Focus. Obviously, there's a lot that goes into that outside of what he actually did on the field. But overall, when you look at where this draft class is, it's no surprise that he would go. I think if he left last year from Ohio State and went to the draft, he
that
would go
have
undrafted.
Been questionable.
Yeah, exactly. But now that he's proven himself a little bit more, it now makes you think, okay, well, if Syracuse can do that to a guy like Kyle McCord, the offense was great, and it put him in a situation where now, he is one of those big names in the upcoming NFL draft. Makes you wonder, okay, now that he's gone, and we know that, likelihood, Ricky Collins, the transfer from LSU who came over a couple of weeks ago, he is likely the guy now. It makes you wonder what they can do with Ricky Collins.
You would imagine, I mean, Ricky Collins is a guy that doesn't really have a ton of tape out there right now, but obviously the recipe is clearly there. They've shown that what they can do with the transfer guys. I'm not necessarily going to give the job to Ricky Collins just yet. I mean, he is obviously the leader in the clubhouse right now, but you got to go through fall camp, obviously, and wouldn't surprise me if Fran took another dip into the portal if another big name went in. I mean,
that is true.
Just never know. I mean, saw a guy today, or I think it was yesterday, Carson Beck goes in the portal. That wasn't expected, so you never know who's going to go into the portal.
That is true.
And I'll give Fran any chance against anyone going head-to-head recruiting in the portal, so not going to give it to Ricky Collins just yet. But I do think you see the potential, what you can do, especially if you're a recruit coming in from out of town. You see a guy like Kyle McCord who was scapegoated out of Ohio State and told that he was this awful person, an awful player, come in, lights the world on fire at Syracuse where he was
Best
the hero of the
season in
town.
Syracuse history.
I mean, Kyle McCord will never buy a drink for himself in this town ever again.
No.
And so you see what you can do and how you could fill in that role yourself if you're a potential recruit.
I saw somebody say, no one has done more in a single season for Syracuse athletics other than Carmelo Anthony besides Kyle McCord. That's just in 1 year of playing.
I'd agree with that, for sure.
I really don't see a way around that.
Yeah,
I mean,
if you're
obviously you don't win a
excluding Carmelo,
championship.
absolutely.
Yeah, you exclude Carmelo, it's got to be Kyle McCord.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to say don't win a championship, but there's not exactly a ton of championships here to boast about.
Yeah, now it really does make you think. Obviously, only 1 year, and so you think, okay, where does he fall in Syracuse history in terms of quarterbacks? It's just tough because of the 1 year.
The 1 year factor makes it kind of tough. You need to have a little bit more longevity probably to be considered the best. I mean, obviously, the best season in program history for one guy.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you can necessarily say just overall body of work and structure like that. I'm not sure you can tell me that he's the best in program history going against guys like Nassib or going against guys like McNabb. I think that's a little tough.
Even Eric Dungy for what he did to for the program, Don McPherson.
Putting them up toe-to-toe like that, I mean, that's...
There are... If he had more years, I would say he is comfortably easily in the top 3. Probably, if he has another year like he did.
Yeah, if you give him one more year, I think you'd probably give it to him.
Yeah, but now, I mean, it's a big what-if game for him declaring for the draft. That caught you off guard. You can call in. Let us know. 315-443-2011 here on Sports Night up until 9 p.m. Griffin, now you look ahead to the next season. It almost felt like Syracuse fans were just waiting on, okay, Kyle McCord's going to get that waiver. They come back, and everything's all great. But it has me a little worried when you look at next year. The schedule
I'm a little worried.
So much harder.
You went from
no Kyle McCord.
You went from end to end with the schedule. This year the schedule was really easy. You probably should have done more with it.
Yeah,
if we're being
arguably.
honest.
If you win that Stanford game,
should
beat Stanford, should beat BC.
You should.
know?
Then you're playing in the playoff.
Yeah.
But so you look at next year, it's going to be a lot worse schedule-wise, and I think people are overlooking how much this team loses.
Yeah.
You're going to lose Justin Barron. You're going to lose Marlo Wax. That's huge.
Even guys like Clarence Lewis is now gone. Elijah Clark is now gone. An already kind of shaky back end to your defense, even though they were great individual players. Now they're gone. And you don't really have a lot coming in to fix those holes. You worry about the secondary big time. You worry about the linebackers with now it's just Derek McDonald and I guess James Hurd steps up. There's so many question marks. I would argue even more question marks right now at this point than we were having last year at this time with this team.
Absolutely, not even a question about it. Because last year you knew what? If it comes down to it, the defense is going to be led by this guy. It's going to be led by Marlo Wax, Justin Barron. You're going to have some leaders in that room. This year, you're going to be without that captain. I mean, we think
Devin Grant, I would bet.
Yeah, assume Devin Grant, Derek McDonald could come in and lead the way. But what my concern leads into being is this year, the defense was shaky at times, but you knew you could compete to get to 40 points. I mean, you knew Kyle McCord could put up points and you guys could go blow for blow in an offensive shootout. Next year, are you going to feel comfortable with that? I'm not at all.
No, not with some of the teams on the schedule, too. They open against Tennessee in Mercedes-Benz Stadium on August 30th. I mean, boy, Tennessee runs a bit of an air raid at this point. That could be very ugly. You have Clemson on the road. You have a resurgent Georgia Tech program right after that on the road. You have Miami, angry from what happened the year before.
You want to talk about angry, though? Georgia Tech's going to be just as angry.
Yeah, Georgia Tech will be angry.
Long post-game presser when they beat them in Week 2 this season.
That is true about, a couple of things said
Miami
about Brett
with
Key.
Carson Beck.
A new quarterback now in Miami, and then you go on after that to SMU. That's all in a row, and SMU, a team that just played in the college football playoff and picked up one of Syracuse's best today, which that was a bit of an interesting swing in Marcellus Barnes, who has now moved places in the ACC, former freshman corner for Syracuse. So there's a lot to worry about. And then you have Notre Dame, who could win a national championship.
Yep.
That's also on the road on the schedule, so it does not look like
especially
good
like
positioning.
You're looking at a team this year that played 13 games. You scored 30-plus points in 10 of those.
Yeah.
That is just I'm going to go ahead and say it right now. That's not happening next year.
No, it's not. It's not. You don't know who you have.
It's insane that happened this year.
Who do you have in the receiver room? Who do you have at quarterback? Yasin Willis at running back? Who do you have behind him? I guess Will Nixon. There's just the question marks are so many
piling up
that it makes you think, what if we are in for a second-year hangover? Speaking of second-year hangover, or just hangover from a previous year, Syracuse women's basketball, Griffin, is in rough shape right now.
Oh, yeah.
They fall to 0-4 in the conference with a loss to SMU on Thursday. An OT, basically buzzer beater loss, 1 second left. This is a team that a year ago now was the hottest team on campus. Everybody wanted to talk about Syracuse women's basketball and the heights that they reached. They were a tournament team, made it to the round of 32 and lost to UConn. Now you start 0-4 in conference, 6-9 overall. It's not going to get a lot easier in the best league in the country.
Yeah, you're trending right now to not make the ACC tournament.
No.
15 of the 18 teams make the tournament. You're dead last at 18. Wake Forest and Pitt also are 0-4 in the conference play. Boston College, or Stanford rather, just picked up their first win. They were also winless. Now you're even further down, and you're just not showing any life.
No.
What makes you think that this team's going to bounce back? They're on a 3-game losing streak, have only one Power 5 win so far this season. It's just not.
You're not in good position.
Oh,
You're
not even close.
And I think part of the problem is, too, at this point in the season, there's a lot that Felicia Leggett-Jack's team just seems to not have learned. After that loss to SMU, she's been talking about discipline all season long and figuring out discipline on both ends of the courts. She was not happy. She had this to say.
We lack discipline down the stretch. We're jumping up and down, and we could have done better. We threw the ball out of bounds and opportunity up 3. We just got to get more discipline. We got to get smarter. We can put you in a position to win, but at the end of the day, players got to show up, and we didn't show up today.
17 turnovers.
Well, turnovers have been a problem with this team all season long. I mean, you look at the turnover numbers, 17 last game. It's not even the worst it's been. The 3 games before that, 22, 19, 19, go up a little bit more. You got 18. Their first couple of games, the first game of the season, you had 30 turnovers.
Unreal.
30 turnovers.
Against Niagara, correct?
Yes.
Against Niagara.
And 21 versus St. Joe's. We talk about discipline. That was more of a defensive focused, like, quote there when she's talking about staying on your feet and staying down on shooters, staying out there. But when I talk about here the discipline word, I think of turning the ball over.
Yeah.
And that's ridiculous to have just consistently 15-plus turnovers. And that partially stems from not having that point guard, a consistent point guard to lead the way. I mean, obviously shuffled through some different things. Olivia Schmidt, Dominique Camp, Lexi McNabb all received some minutes. Angelica Velez. It just has not been pretty whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And that just comes from not having a revolving door on point guard. Last year, you had Deasia Fair, who dominated and was not only a scorer, but she ran the offense for you. This year, you just don't have that person. You have Georgia Woolley, who is theoretically your alpha, but you just don't have the point guard to lead the offense.
I think part of the problem is, too, like you said, with no clear point guard, you see flashes from each player, though. Olivia Schmidt in the tournament in Florida that they played, there were flashes from Olivia Schmidt. Angelica Velez just 2 games ago had 10 assists. It was a career high. You saw flashes from her. Dominique Camp at the beginning of the year, especially games against Maryland and St. Joe's, she took off in the scoring department and looked like, okay, it might be Dominique Camp. There's been so many. This might be the point guard. This might be the point guard. You talk about, John Madden. Sorry, you used to say you have 2 quarterbacks, then you have none. Actually, I don't know. Raiders coaches. If you have 2 quarterbacks, you have none.
Yep.
If you have 3 point guards,
that's where I thought you were going with that.
You have none, right? And if you have 3 point guards that none of the 3 can't consistently operate the offense, then you start to get into those turnover holes. Like you mentioned, it's the problem where who's leading this team, who's setting up the offense each time? Can they do it in a consistent manner? And the answer is no. The answer has just been
yes,
no.
And it doesn't help that while you do have strong perimeter wings to some extent in Georgia Woolley and Sophie Burrows, Woolley's been pretty consistent. Burrows has just not really been able to take that next. She's taken the next step for sure, but just hasn't taken the step in that consistency department.
Yeah. You can see it with her, though, is the thing.
Yeah.
But it's not every game. It really is not.
It doesn't help when, as a team, you go 3 for 16 from beyond the arc. That's just not a recipe for success. Burrows goes 2 for 8. Woolley 1 for 4. Camp over 3. And then Potts goes over 1 off the bench. So you just don't have a consistent offensive attack.
That 0 for 1 was an air ball, too. So
that's always helpful.
If you string everything together, I mean, there's just so many pockets of struggle right now with this team. And even with like the good moments, Syracuse was riding high basically into overtime. They had a good stretch where they came back against SMU's, very back and forth. Georgia Woolley, 2 points away from her 1,000th career point. A little floater through the lane that would have won the game. Hits one rim, hits the other, and rolls off. She was devastated. Later in that game, she took over in overtime as much as she could. But when it really mattered, the shots just did not fall on the offensive end. 71 points, and takes you overtime to get to that point. And they couldn't stop Nia Robertson on defense.
Dominated.
Nia Robertson, 28 points. She's the 3rd leading scorer in the ACC. So you knew there was going to be some trouble with that. But just the overall struggles with this team makes you think, where is the good and it really makes you worry.
And what concerns me is, so you go, let's think, you push back at the end of last year, you think of what you have going in next season. Now, you're all right, you got some pieces coming back, Varejao, Woolley. I look at the end of this season.
Yeah, nothing.
You're not really, what excites you about what's coming back next year?
Not much. Angelica Velez could take a step forward, but who knows? Shai Hawkins and Kira Scott are good, but are they ready to take over?
Yeah, and Burrow's come back for another year. I think there's potential, but it's just like it was this year where people need to take that step forward, and I haven't fully seen it yet. You're going to be really hurting next year. Losing Varejao, losing Dominique Camp, as inconsistent she may be, losing Sanaya Wilson, losing Kyra Wood. This front court is going to be completely depleted.
Yeah.
Just gone. Woolley gone. I mean, there's going to lose all your veterans. It's going to be in trouble.
So now it begs the question, what can they do at this point in the year to turn things around and actually start winning games against teams that, face it, at this point, they're not supposed to be? If you have the answer, call in. Let us know. 315-443-2011. We're here on SportsNite up until 9 p.m. One of the biggest questions that I've had is, they learn from all of these games, right? At least you think. And so Felicia Leggett-Jack, after each game, she has a big motto where she goes, there are no wins and losses. There are wins and lessons, right? And lessons learned. Well, after that SMU game, it was a very, very different tune. Take a listen.
We just got to get better. Flat out got to get better. This is not a learned lesson like this. And there's no second place trophy. We didn't learn anything because we didn't come through. This is a game that we should have came through, and we didn't. And we need to get better, and we will.
You can hear it in her voice there.
Just dejected from top to bottom.
What do you do?
I think she's asking the same questions. At this point, they've been in some games. Don't get me wrong, there's been games they've been out of, but they've been in games and competed in certain games, just not being able to get over that next step. Games like Texas A&M, you're within 2 points with 5 minutes left on the road. That'd be a nice win. A&M goes on a 10-0 run to end the game.
Yeah.
Creighton, you got absolutely just boat raced.
They had no chance in Creighton. Creighton, to be fair,
was really good.
No team has ever shot the lights out in a basketball game ever like Creighton.
I was there. I was absolutely floored.
Yeah, they had one of the best shooting performances.
I think they went like 6 for 6 from 3 to start the game. That was just brutal.
That one you can't win.
But Albany goes down to the buzzer. Number 11 Maryland, you were coming off a loss to St. Joe's where you couldn't defend the 3. But number 11 Maryland, you were competing with them for, I think it was probably 35 minutes, and it's just about playing a full 40.
Yeah.
Or in SMU's case, it went even longer in overtime, but they're just not putting together a full 40 minutes.
Yeah, and I think the root problem of all of this, and it's just such a tough root problem, but it is, the shot selection on this team has been pretty disastrous. And Coach Jack, mid-game, has, admittedly called her team out for it many, many times.
Well, it's a lot of just stand still and, stand still, let the girls go to work.
Yeah, exactly.
And just not communicating together. Part of that stems back to not having the point guard like we talked about. Part of that's just players making decisions that don't seem to be the best ones for the team as a whole.
Yeah, and they run plays to get open looks. They do. This is not the men's team where the men's team just basically does not run plays.
Yes.
They do run plays, but there are chances where they're getting open looks and the shots just aren't falling. And you just have to wonder, A, will those shots ever fall? And B, what happens if they do? Because this team, construction-wise, still can be good. Maybe not great.
Yeah,
Definitely, at this point, not great. But they can be good. They have the pieces in place, and FLJ, Felicia Leggett-Jack, is a great coach.
Absolutely. And then if you go into, like you mentioned, they have the pieces. I want you lay this out for you of the potential of this team. Let's say one of your point guards locked in, stepped up for the rest of the season, okay? Solidify that spot.
Mm-hmm.
Burroughs and Woolley start figuring things out consistently. Burroughs gives you 12 a night, Woolley gives you 18. Wood and Varejao in the front court, I feel comfortable with. That's a really dominant.
Yeah.
It could be a dominant duo. Two strong players on the inside there. Maybe you don't have a ton of depth off the bench there. Maybe Kira Scott and Journey Thompson can come in, give you some minutes.
Yeah. I like that lineup, though.
I do.
I like that rotation.
It's just not.
What's
someone's
not
got to
clicking?
step up. It's. I think just all stems back to the point guard. That's the head of the offense, the head of the team. It stems from that. Just having that as the quarterback on the floor. That's what you need.
You cut off the head of the snake. Where does the rest of the body go? Similar situations for Syracuse men's and women's basketball. It hasn't been the best season for Syracuse basketball as a whole, so it kind of makes you turn your attention to lacrosse season. The schedule dropping for men's lacrosse, and we know the opponents for women's lacrosse, so we'll hit you on the other side when Sports Night returns in just a moment.
There is a one-stop listen for everything Syracuse athletics.
You got great talent on this offense. Like, you can't go dormant for an entire quarter. And
The Ostrom Avenue podcast provides unique opinions, plus exciting interviews from industry experts.
joined by Georgia Tech play-by-play broadcaster Andy Demetra, Syracuse.com, football beat reporter Emily Laker.
Check out weekly interviews on YouTube and listen at waer.org or wherever you get your podcast.
Hi, this is David Gans, host of the Grateful Dead Hour, the weekly audio postcard from the wide musical world of America's best-loved band. Join me for the Grateful Dead Hour, Saturday afternoons at 5 on WAER, your local NPR station from Syracuse University.
Sugar magnolia, blossoms blooming, it's all empty and I don't care. So my baby down by the river.
Hi, this is Steve Inskeep with NPR News. Any good news organization should bring you points of view that you agree with and points of view that you don't. Facts you approve and facts that make you uncomfortable. Our job is to bring you the full picture in context so you can decide. This is NPR.
Listen to WAER News every weekday during Morning Edition from 5 to 9 and All Things Considered from 4 to 6, or catch up anytime at WAER.org.
Hi, I'm Chris Boyd, host of Think. Think is a show for curious minds. Whether we're discussing history, science, politics, or the arts, my hope is that every conversation inspires curiosity and complexity, and that every listener walks away with their own questions, inspiration, and a thirst for more knowledge. Tune in and join me as we learn something new and take a moment to think.
Weekdays from 2 to 3 on 88.3 WAER.
Hello and welcome back into Sports Night here on WAER over at our Ostrom Avenue studios. I'm Griffin Marcy alongside Hudson Ridley. Just got wrapped up talking about some women's basketball, and we're going to head over to the turf because just yesterday, or I think it was yesterday or the day before, the men's and women's lacrosse schedules finally came out. It had been a long while awaiting this. Two programs that had solid, successful seasons last year. So we're going to break down the schedule here. If you want to get involved, give us a call at 315-443-2011 or text us at 315-556-3929. I want to hear what you guys think about how the schedule plays out, what your expectations are, and love to hear anything you got for us. We're also available to be seen on WAER Sports Talk on YouTube and on X. We're live streaming on there as well. Hudson, so we talked about men's lacrosse schedule jumps out at you. Obviously, last year, successful season for Gary Gate and company. Went pretty far in the tournament, finished 12-6. Going into 2025, first thoughts on the schedule? What do you got?
I love this schedule. I think it's diversified in terms of your opponents, but it's like a lot of D1 lacrosse. It's sharpening iron with iron.
Yeah, you're going to have your tests.
You open the season against Jacksonville in the Dome. You might be thinking, oh, Jacksonville, what do they know? No, Jacksonville's a good program.
That is a good program.
That's a solid program, followed up with Vermont, who Syracuse has been scheduling for years, and then Towson, an opponent they had in the NCAA tournament. That's usually, you have your Cupcake 3 at the beginning of the year.
That's not what that is.
That's no Cupcake 3. At the beginning, and it makes sense with a team that has, national championship aspirations. Everything's really starting to come together. You kind of have all the pieces in place. So you want to sharpen up the schedule. And the other non-conference games, I love them too. You go to Maryland, play at College Park.
Tough team. You went there a couple of years ago. I mean, last year they came here, went down. I think that was the game where they had Syracuse score the game-winning goal, got waved off, and then Maryland wins it in overtime.
That was razor thin.
Harvard's another interesting one.
Harvard in the Dome, February 22nd. That's one where you really just, I mean, I don't know what you expect out of Harvard in comparison to Syracuse. Once some of those Ivy League teams leave their Ivy League bubble, you never really know what you're going to get from them. They played Princeton tough a couple of years ago, so now Harvard.
And then what kind of just throws me off a little bit, so after the Harvard game, right, you go to Utah, and then you have Johns Hopkins at home, okay? So going to Utah, that'll just be an interesting experience for the team as well. Another interesting little benchmark. Obviously, last year you kind of beat up on Utah pretty good.
That has to be the farthest west they've ever played in program history.
I would imagine.
At least visiting a team, because Utah, I think, is the farthest west technically in D1 history. But yeah, very interesting.
Hopkins, another clash with the Titans. That'll be a really good game. But what's interesting to me, then you throw in Manhattan and Colgate right there, just kind of in the center. Those were the games you started the season off with last year.
Yeah, there's your, we said at the beginning, well, it's not a cupcake 3 at the beginning.
Well, there's your tune-up 2. There's your tune-up 2.
That's your tune-up 2. I like that. Your tomato cans to beat up on. Manhattan wasn't particularly close last year, and they pulled away from Colgate, but Colgate's a solid program.
See, but right after you go Manhattan-Colgate, that's when you get into the fun.
Oh, yeah.
That's when you get into conference play, your final 5 games. Virginia on the road. You welcome back-to-back national champions in Notre Dame. Cornell, a trip up in Long Island. That'll be another interesting game.
That's fun. That will, I think, be the best environment of the season. A lacrosse game against Cornell on Long Island, especially with Spallina headlining the team being from Mount Sinai. That is...
I think hosting Notre Dame might beat them out a little bit there.
I don't know. I think the
you saw last year the Virginia game was huge at home, and that was just a Saturday game. I think when you're welcoming back-to-back national champions, I expect both Notre Dame and Syracuse to be atop the country. So I wouldn't put it past that to be the top game.
Yeah, I wouldn't blame you there.
Then heading to Duke will be tough. And finishing out at North Carolina home. I mean, every game in the ACC is going to be difficult. That's just straight up fact.
No doubt. North Carolina, they may have distanced themselves a little bit from North Carolina at this point. 2 years ago, that was kind of the measuring stick of, okay, who is the final team in the ACC? Who is the bottom rung? That was a bit of a back and forth. But now, with all the pieces in place, and you have a team mostly made of juniors who are, very, very used to big-time games at this point. It's not like a make-or-break season because most everybody can come back. But it feels like this is one where you have to get to...
The expectation should be championship weekend.
Oh, the expectation is championship, I think.
Yeah.
I think the expectation is championship. I think a fine result is championship weekend. But if you don't make Memorial Day weekend... with this team?
Yeah, because you are bringing back just talent upon talent.
It's so much across the board.
Especially on the offensive side. Michael Leo, Luke Roa, Jackson Birtwhistle. I mean,
obviously
Riley
you have
Figueres
Spallina.
on defensive end, of course, and then Spallina headlines it, bringing back Sam English.
Who was supposed to leave for the NLL and just comes back. So you do have English, and then you also have Hiltz, who cannot be ignored, flying under the radar. And the reason that I say it almost feels like a make-or-break year is because this is the last year for Owen Hiltz. And obviously there's so much other talent outside of him, but on a team that really didn't have a go-to scorer last year, they had a best player in Joey Spallina, but they didn't have a go-to scorer. Sometimes when you needed to force a shot, it was Owen Hiltz.
Yeah.
And there's no one else really on this roster that I feel comfortable going to consistently to force a shot. Michael Leo, I think, is a fine bet to force a shot, sure. But that matters so much to the makeup of your team that it feels like Owen Hiltz is the keystone right here, that if he's gone, then it's like, oh, what's the identity of this team? That's why, to me, it kind of feels make or break.
What I like, what kind of just headlines to me, not necessarily headlines, one interesting storyline for me is How does it factor in? Hopefully, if you're a Syracuse fan, Johnny Mullen takes that jump.
Yeah.
Last year was splitting time at the face-off X, and I think this year, going from sophomore to freshman year, I think he could take a big leap. He was impressive last year.
I agree. There were a lot of games where he looked better than Mason Cone.
Yeah.
Like, there were a lot of games where he looked better than Mason Cone.
And then part of that is, I think, the small sample size where it's like he comes in with a little more energy. Cone's been working the whole game.
Yeah.
And that's where he comes. Actually, compare this. I got an analogy for you. Comparing this to the Detroit Lions of David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. So you have Montgomery pounding in the whole game. Gibbs comes in as that lightning, that flash in the pan, has all that energy, and that's what catches the other teams off
you
guard.
Need your thunder and your lightning.
Exactly.
So maybe you're saying that sample size of Mullen made him look a little bit
I just think
maybe?
it made him look a little bit better, and just he's fresher than when they have two elite options. He's much fresher when he steps on the field than the opposing's face-off guy.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. Also, he's not trying to go end-to-end. Like, I think he actually did once go end-to-end and copy Mason Cone. I think it was against High Point. But other than that, he's not really going end-to-end many times like Mason Cone would try to do. He's face-off, get-off. So that, to me, is a big hinge on the season. But I think when you look at it, the biggest
3 goals
hinge,
last year, actually.
3 goals from Mullen.
Yep. I had High Point, Towson, and last one's UNC.
Oh, yeah, you're right. It was a very good freshman year.
Absolutely.
From him. A very, very good freshman year. So when you factor that in, I think at the X, we were having conversations 2 years ago about, is Syracuse the worst face-off team in the country? When you had Johnny Rachuza and Jack Fine, and neither one of them could do the job.
That team, they were just playing defense for just the entire game.
They never got the ball. And so now if you have the consistency of Mullen, that's one thing. And you can let your offense with all these weapons go to work. I think it could be the most dangerous offense in the country this year. On the defensive end, you return a lot of good pieces, but the main question mark is in goal with Jimmy McCool. Jimmy McCool, in the small sample size that has been shown, has either A, not been tested, or B, been very, very good. Will Mark was very, very good. Can Jimmy McCool live up to the expectation is the question.
It's actually interesting. Both the men's and women's lacrosse team this year, we're getting the women's in just a little bit, are going to have to replace their goalies that were atop the country.
Yeah.
And I think Syracuse does return, on the men's side, returns some solid defenders, which should help out a lot. But this isn't a schedule that you're going to have time to, rake in a new goalie. You're thrown into the fire pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Jacksonville's going to give you a good test right away.
Yeah, they are.
Towson will give you a good test. Maryland will give you a good test. That's in your first 3 to 4 games. I think you're going to know if you have something in Jimmy McCool within the first 2 weeks of the season.
Mm-hmm. I have heard rumblings, though, of this was even last year, of people saying, well, Will Mark is great. We all know Will Mark is great, and you can't take Will Mark out of a starting spot because he, A, is who he is, and B, he hasn't done anything to warrant that. But I heard rumblings that Jimmy McCool was better than that, and which is so crazy. It's so crazy to think about that he would be better than that. And if that's the case, then the expectation should 100% be championship. If Jimmy McCool is better than Will Mark, if Mullen continues to take a step forward.
If you upgrade face-off and in goal, and you bring back the best offense in the country, congratulations.
Yeah,
I would hope the expectation.
If my aunt had wheels, she'd be a bicycle. I understand. We don't actually know. And the if is a big stretch. But at this point, with the talent around, Gary Gates gotten very comfortable. Everybody should be settled in by now. The expectation is very clear with virtually every member of this team that is a contributor about what role they should play, because really the only contributor that you lose outside of Will Mark is Jake Stevens to an extent. And Sam Alexo, obviously, is a massive, massive loss. I just mean on either end.
Yep.
You lose those big 3 being gone is a shot in the foot. But there's just so much talent on this team.
So you can make up for it in other ways. Your strengths can kind of be diversified a little bit. Maybe last year had a little bit more of balance. This year, offense is going to be elite.
Oh, 100%. The offense should be, like I said, there are offenses that'll be good. Obviously, I think Virginia's offense will be one of the best in the country to look out for. Duke, even with Brendan
Notre
O'Neill
Dame,
leaving, will be great.
They're going to be back.
Notre Dame, Cornell, all teams that are on Syracuse's schedule, those will be big offensive tests and a lot of firepower that can compete with Syracuse. But I expect this offense to be the best in the country.
So, one final question for you before we transition a little bit would be final record prediction coming at. What you got?
It really makes it tough because let me get the math exactly correct on the amount of games here, too. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm not going to leave you in the dark here. 15 makes you think. I think this team could finish the regular season 14-1.
Really?
14-1.
I think they absolutely can. I'm going to give you 12-3. I think that Notre Dame game could be tough.
Sorry, 14 games. Miscounted. 13, I think 13-1.
I did not give you 11-3.
11-3.
I think you drop one of the first four. I have a gut feeling about that. I think something about that just doesn't click right away. Maybe it's McCool not settling in just yet. Towson was coming in with some revenge. Maryland game will be another tough one. I just see something just doesn't click in one of those. Hopkins could come back for revenge. Virginia, Notre Dame, Duke. I think there's just so much going on there.
They'll always play Hopkins to a razor-thin margin. Whether both teams are great, whether one's great and one's not, that is always going to be a close game at this point. I say the one loss that they have, I think they lose to Virginia at Klockner Stadium. I think they beat Notre Dame at home. They settle in by that point. I definitely believe games with Maryland will be close. I think Johns Hopkins, like I said, that's always a close game. But with where this roster is right now and not a lot of holes to be found, that makes me think that this team is in pretty good position at least to only lose one, maybe 2 games in the regular season. I know that expectation is shockingly high and puts a lot on, but still.
So we talked about the men's lacrosse team. Another team on campus with a lot of high expectations, traditionally maybe a little lower this year, Syracuse women's lacrosse. We're going to break down their schedule here. But if you guys have some thoughts on your expectations for the Syracuse women's lacrosse team, give us a call at 315-443-2011 or interact with us on our text line at 315-556-3929. So now, Hudson, this women's lacrosse team has been a squad that's been right there at the top every single year as of late. Last year, you go to the Final Four again, drop it to Boston College, lost to Boston College 3 times last year. Boston College has been your kryptonite consistently, but this year you kind of lose some pieces. Every year, the past couple of years, you've been losing consistently, just chipping away at pieces falling away. In 2022, or that's 2023 rather, you had Megan Carney, Megan Tyrell. You had some really elite players. You go next year, you replace them a little bit. Other people step up. Natalie Smith steps into the lineup. Olivia Adamson takes another step forward. But this year, it's going to kind of fall on the shoulders of Olivia Adamson.
And I think each year you downgrade that. Now, that's, no shade to Olivia Adamson, but I think when you look at overall what you lose last year to this year, there's no more Emma Tyrell. Emma Tyrell's gone. Like you said, no more Natalie Smith. Maddie Baxter, gone. I think a lot of the question marks are around who is going to step up. Who is going to be the one to fill that role? Or not that role, but the other roles around Olivia Adamson. The one good part about this is that Emma Ward returns for the 90th year of eligibility.
That is huge.
But that is absolutely massive to at least the distribution on this team.
Yeah. So Ward and Adamson will headline the offense. Couple of different people that could come in, play that, take that next step. Jolie Caramelli, entering her sophomore year, played some key minutes as a freshman. Ashley Volpe and it was one more person, I forget her name. Ashley Volpe and Alexa Vogelman, both 5 stars last year, missed the whole first season of their career. They'll just come on the field this year. Hopefully they can get some time. Hopefully they've come back healthy. They can take that next step forward.
A little bit invigorating, I guess, to bring that back. It's just when you look at the schedule, I mean, this schedule, if you had this in prior years, this would be difficult.
Yeah.
But now, I mean, this seems very, very tough to get over the hump.
Yeah, you got going to, let's just a couple of headliners off the top of it. You got going to Maryland. That's really tough. Going to Chapel Hill, historically really good program. Going to Northwestern.
Hosting Northwestern.
Hosting Northwestern, yep. Hosting Clemson will be tough. Hopkins will be an interesting game. And you got to host Notre Dame for all these conference games. Just ACC is the premier conference lacrosse.
Yeah.
Premier conference in lacrosse. And then, of course, ending the season with your arch rival who's continuously gotten the best of you, and that's Boston College.
I mean, when you look at the grand scheme of things and figure that this roster has taken a step back, there's a lot of work to do if you want to win some of these games. Maryland, you lost last year at home with a better roster. And yes, very close game, but still, at home.
Also, last year you had a really slow start to the season.
Yeah.
Last year you started off with a loss to Northwestern and Maryland. You were 1-2 through 3 games. That was not ideal by any means, but you started to figure things out, finishing off 16-6, of course. So I think this year, hopefully you can get off to a little bit better start. But, I mean, there's just a lot of
tough games on this, too. And I think, losing your goalie also hurts. Schweitzer on her way to Northwestern, who then comes back to the Dome to visit.
That's really an interesting dynamic there. And Savannah Schweitzer was also a key figure on the offense as well last year. She leaves, but you're going to have to replace Daniela Guyette. Will have to be likely the replacement in goal. Bella Abbott also could compete for that job, but it's likely going to go to Guyette, so we'll see who steps up there.
Got to be lights out, though, whoever steps up. There are some interesting matchups, though, that I think, you don't want to pencil anything in as a win, but programs that you don't often hear about. You go on the road to Yale, and then you follow it up going out to Cal Berkeley, because obviously, a conference game now. I didn't know up until very recently that Berkeley had lacrosse in any form. I guess they're playing lacrosse out there at Cal. There's a lot of West Coast programs out there with USC and Colorado, but I find that interesting. Some of the games that they'll have will be fun and interesting, but I mean, this is a gauntlet.
Both programs, men's and women's, have gauntlets of schedules, which is what you expect from one of the top programs in all of college lacrosse. You want them to go out and be tested each and every time, but
iron sharpens iron.
To some extent, a little too many tests might knock your tournament pedigree down a little bit too far.
Yeah, no, I think this year is also the year that Clemson could pass Syracuse as well. Clemson, a relatively new program, has done very well in recruiting and facilities and has kind of built themselves up to a point where they could overtake Syracuse. That game is on March 1st. You have new opponents coming into the ACC where you can't afford to lose to them. You play both Cal and Stanford. You can't afford to lose to either one because you're supposed to be that historic program within the conference, or at least one of them. So a lot of question marks remaining.
A lot of question marks, and to me, it all surrounds, the biggest one is always going to be for me, will you get over the hump of Boston College?
I just don't think this is the year. I don't
either. I think either of the last 2 years, if you couldn't have done it with much more talented teams, those were the opportunities last year. You lost to them 3 times. You lost to them in the regular season finale with the ACC on the line. Then you lose to them in the ACC championship, and then you lose to them in the Final Four.
Yeah.
Just not ideal.
Rough stretch there.
Rough stretch for sure. One team that didn't just escape the rough stretch, and they have Boston College this weekend, and that's the men's basketball team.
Huh?
We're going to come up against a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to talk to our talk reporter who's going to be at the Boston College game this weekend, Andrew Della Piana. So we're going to take a quick break, but don't step away. You're listening to Sports Night here on WAER.
You know a good story when you hear it. Makes you feel, laugh, think. Sometimes you get a little teary. I'm Scott Simon, host of Weekend Edition Saturday, and each week we bring you stories from around the country and around the world. Stories that help you learn, make you smile, catch you by surprise. Please join us every Saturday for the news you need and the stories you won't forget.
Saturday morning from 8 to 10 on WAER.
Delve into the rich tapestry of acoustic-led folk, roots, and Americana music as we welcome back Common Threads here on 88.3 FM WAER. Enjoy national and international acts as well as local artists every Sunday with host Pete Thomas. Whether you're seeking the comfort of timeless classics or contemporary gems and music discovery, don't miss Common Threads Sundays from 2 to 5 exclusively on 88.3 WAER, your local NPR station.
Hi, this is Nancy Eaton. At United Way of Central New York, it's our mission to ignite and uphold the spirit of community collaboration, giving, and civic engagement to improve lives in Central New York. Our mission wouldn't be possible without the support of local listeners and local media like WAER. United Way of Central New York supports WAER because WAER is committed to telling the stories that matter for our community.
Welcome back into Sports Night. We only got you for 11 more minutes here, so we'll get the BS, for a better term, out of the way. Griffin Marcy across the way from me. I'm Hudson Ridley. Syracuse men's basketball picks up a win against Georgia Tech. You think, hey, maybe there's a chance that this little slide could end. Tomorrow, taking on Boston College in Boston, someone who's from Boston and in Boston currently. Andrew Della Piana. It's a lot of Boston. Too much Boston for my liking. Andrew Della Piana is in Boston right now. Andrew, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Hudson. I'm not actually in Boston right now, about 30 minutes north of it, but, you know, I still get the feel from it. I think I've been there a couple times.
Okay, good. I didn't want that much Boston.
Yeah, that's pretty lame. I feel like at that point, I'm in Boston. But
never get too much Boston.
Oh, no, we're in New York here. We don't need that much Boston.
I definitely agree. So, Boston College, not to get too Boston, but we got to talk about them. 9-6, 1-3 in the ACC. A team with kind of a similar point right now to Syracuse where, you know, you don't really feel like this is going to turn into anything this year. What have you noticed from Boston College early on?
Well, Hudson, this team is in a really weird spot right now because in the day and age of college basketball where your entire team can transfer from one year to the other, that's really exactly what's happened with Boston College. You don't return all five scoring leaders from last year. Clydell Harris, he's at Mississippi State. Jaden Zachary, still in the ACC at Clemson. Devin McLaughlin, Vanderbilt. Quentin Post, who I felt like was playing college basketball for 7-8 years. He's now on a two-way contract with the Warriors. And even Mason Matson, who was their point guard last year, he's now at Utah. And it's so weird because BC was coming off a fantastic season. You won 20 games for the first time in over a decade. You won an NIT tournament game for the first time in 15 years. You won 2 games in the ACC tournament where you knocked off Clemson, and then your entire team leaves for the portal. You're thinking, if you're Earl Grant, you're thinking, where did my guys go, and where can we go from here?
It's almost like the Jim Larrañaga. Where you got to the Final Four, 8 players leaving for the portal.
Something doesn't add up there.
It's a new age.
ADP, my question, Andrew, my question for you would rather be, so Syracuse last game, they just beat Georgia Tech. Boston College, their last game, they lost by 20 to Georgia Tech. But BC hasn't played since that Georgia Tech game. They've had that week off. I feel like that's going to give them that extra boost to possibly overcome this.
I think maybe a little bit too. You know, it's the classic old question of rust versus rest, and you know we can play that game all day long. But you know, you look at the sheer numbers of literally these last 2 games for each team. I should say having a common opponent. And BC got their doors blown off them. I mean, every time Georgia Tech was running a high screen, BC was switching. You got the mismatch, and it was a field day for the Yellow Jackets offense. Then they come in the Dome, and I'm hearing about the depth perception. Georgia Tech shoots 4 of 20 from three-point land and only scores 55 points in the Dome. So you're thinking, did Syracuse just play that well defensively? Did Georgia Tech just play bad offensively? So you kind of get down to that game, and that's really what we can go off right now, Griffin.
If you could see Andrew's Coke bottle glasses, you would know. Andrew knows a thing or two about depth perception. Sorry to do that to you. Well,
hey, there's nothing wrong with the collection of 4 eyes people here on the show.
You know what? That is fair. I'm outnumbered. Syracuse, a team that returns J.J. Starling, and now it seems like, okay, you might be in a little bit better of a position. How do they match up with Boston College?
Well, I think it works out for J.J. Starling's favor, and I said this last game after Georgia Tech where J.J.'s the guy right now. He's by far the best player on the floor, no matter who is out there on the floor with him. I mean, Griffin described it when he was on the broadcast for Georgia Tech. J.J. Starling stands at the block S for about 20 seconds, and then Syracuse starts to get in their offensive set. I mean, there's no other player on Syracuse that can do that right now. We saw it in the 7 games he was out. For BC side of things, Donald Hand, who's the small forward for them, he's really going to have to steer the ship for them. He's done it in these first handful of games for them where leads them in points, leads them in rebounds as well. And the problem is that they don't really have a true big man in the middle to stop Eddie Lampkin, so I'm really looking forward to that matchup. But Donald Hand is a guy that can score the basketball, rebound the basketball well, and again, an elevated role that he had from last year. Yeah, he played in 34 games and he had 5 points, but he only averaged 12 minutes off the bench. So this is the first time we're seeing someone kind of get in that starting role and have to take a huge jump from freshman year to sophomore year.
That was interesting. You mentioned that Georgia Tech game. That was literally Syracuse's offense down the stretch of that game.
Yeah.
J.J. Starling, walk the ball up, literally stand there.
Yeah, just stand there.
Without 10 seconds of the shot clock, get a ball screen from Jair Davis, and go to the rack.
Yeah, that was about it. That's all you can really do. This Boston College team, though, I will say, if you look at some of the wins/losses on their schedule, they have had a miserable year. And obviously they don't have the same pedigree.
Syracuse can't exactly say it's better there.
Yeah, I was going to say, and obviously it's not the same pedigree as Syracuse where, it's highlighted that you have a miserable year, but you get blown out by VCU, you squeak by the Citadel, Missouri State, you have a 2-point win.
By Stonehill.
You lose at home to Dartmouth. I mean,
Dartmouth.
But who's Syracuse?
Smart kids?
Exactly. They were calculating the angles on the jump shots. That was the problem.
Who is Syracuse, though, to be like, oh, you barely beat this team by this much?
That is true. There's not a lot of room to talk.
Beat Lemoyne by 4. You squeak by Cornell. You squeak by all these games. Youngstown State takes you to double overtime. I'm not sure Syracuse can be like, you guys beat Stonehill by 4. Well, that's not how that works.
So it begs the question now, with how bad this Boston College schedule is and how okay to bad, truly bad, they've performed through this schedule and with the roster construction right now that they're dealing with. Andrew, what does a win mean for Syracuse really in this spot?
I'm going to tell you, it means just about as much as a win against Georgia Tech. A whole lot of nothing, really. Right? This team is fighting for a spot in the ACC tournament. So anytime you go up against these quote-unquote bottom feeders, which Syracuse might actually be a part of, so we still have to keep that in consideration, you got to be up on these teams that are the 3 teams that are not going to make the ACC tournament, with 15 out of the 18 making it. So the wins that you can get, you have to take advantage of them. I mean, I look at that game last year, the second game between Syracuse and BC, and it snapped the Orange's 11-game win streak against the Eagles. And it was only a 5-point loss. But the reason you lost that game is BC won in a 22-0 run in that game, and you lost that. And you looked at the end of the year when Syracuse is in that double-digit seeding for the ACC tournament, wondering if we just get one of those games back, we're playing a little bit of a weaker opponent in the first round, and maybe we squeak by. Again, they played NC State, who went on to win the whole thing.
Yeah.
But still, the teams at the bottom of the table you have to take care of, and that's the opportunity they have in front of them tomorrow.
Well, Syracuse is definitely at the bottom of the table with
correct.
them right now. No questions about that. So Hudson asks you, what does a win mean? I'll flip it on its head there. What do you think a loss does?
A loss for this team, I don't know. Should we cancel the season after a loss to Boston, to a team like Boston College? Maybe. But in all honesty, it's really, again, I feel like we've been saying a must-win game for just about every single game up to this point now, because you have to give yourself some chance in the latter half of the season to, compete for the ACC tournament and potentially a spot in the postseason tournament. But I think a loss is detrimental to this team, Griffin.
Yeah. I think something that Syracuse fans are maybe overlooking now is the fact that because the ACC now has 18 teams, not every team makes the ACC tournament. A couple of years ago, we were talking about, hey, could they make the NCAA tournament? Last year, we were saying, can they make the NIT? Now it's can they make the ACC tournament?
How the mighty have fallen.
Yes, never the best. Andrew Delapiana, you are always the best. We hope you have...
Oh, Hudson, thank you so much.
You know what? I just had to say it. We hope you have a great time tomorrow at Boston College. Syracuse continuing this ACC gauntlet of a schedule that they have had. Again, you can listen here on WAER. Countdown to tip-off for that game is at 2:30, with the game time starting at 3. Then we'll have you on the double overtime all the way up until 7. Griffin, you'll be on that double overtime. Hopefully that game goes
Hopefully
well.
a happier one, but it's always a little more fired up if it's a bad one.
That is true. There could be a bad one tomorrow. The only way to find out is to listen right here on 88.3 WAER Syracuse. A couple of thank yous to hand out. Our producer, Jordan Leonard. Our engineer, his first time behind the board, Nathaniel Cunningham. Our reporter, Andrew Delapiana. We thank you for calling in from Beantown. And then our WAER Sports Talk desk of Josh Richardson and John Baccio. Again, don't forget, tune in tomorrow at 2:30 for McClurg Remodeling Countdown to Tip-Off, Syracuse and Boston College. For Griffin Marcy, I'm Hudson Ridley saying so long, and we hope you enjoyed tonight's episode of Sports Night.